1, 2, 3.
Yes, it's the Late Late Breakfast Show with your host, Bernie J. Mitchell.
Are you in?
Are you in?
Shall we start every podcast with a 10-minute meditation? So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 90... I've forgotten.
7.
Nearly. It's 94.
No, 94. It's close.
No, it's a 93. I actually purposely went out of the room to check, and so there we go. I think it's 90. It's 94. 94.
Okay,
Last
94.
one was Brian from...
If not, we'll just... If it is meant to be 93, we'll just delay it 1 week and... Yeah.
I could have done that and just spared everyone this. So I've dragged again, because we for the second time today, I've dragged Rebecca into the studio at Work Hubs, and because I was going through all the people I know, which doesn't take very long, to find out how they would use
That's absolutely
different...
not true. I think it would take you days.
Oh yes, because I'm so popular. How they use different elements of the internet, and you are... You know,
one of the people who knows how to use the internet.
Yes, and you're my little co-worker. I don't mean little as in detrimental. That's just horribly patronising. You're my fellow struggling writer, mental health guru, co-working Zen
Guru
master.
came up again.
Oh, I don't think we'll stop that. So
How would I describe myself? Is that where you were going?
I wasn't going to ask that, but I was going to.
Sorry, I just wanted to talk about me. No, what were you actually going to ask?
I was going to say, you should say that actually.
Yeah? Okay.
What are you known for? What would you like to be known for is how I always start this.
I'm Rebecca, to begin with. I'm a freelance writer, and I mainly focus in co-working, mental health, well-being. A big fan of yoga as well. So I just like being able to take stories of things that people are really passionate about. So either their own personal stories or an idea that they're working on, and help them to be able to communicate that with the people who really matter.
Oh.
Yeah.
And you do it very well.
Thank you.
Don't mind me saying. So what I want to pull out of you today is why we should write on our... Because I know why. I've got this, you should write about what you do in your co-working space on your blog, and then people sort of turn their very nice, cosy co-working space, which is really cool, into some kind of corporate speak, robot language thing. So could you vent on that?
just openly vent. Well, I think one of the big issues there is that we're scared to be honest about what it is that we're really doing, and we kind of want to give the marketing spiel, and doing something, even doing a podcast, I have this fear behind it where I'm like, but I don't know if I'm going to present myself in the right way. And behind that you realise that actually if you're presenting yourself in a genuine way, then yes, you'll probably alienate some people, but you'll get the right people, which is what's really important. So a lot of the time in co-working, as in any other industry, we're just churning out so much content that's just the same thing over and over again, and we're not taking the risks to actually say anything that makes us unique. We're not coming out and saying what we're really thinking about, why we really care about this, what we want our spaces to become, what we're struggling with, because we have to present this brand image to the universe. Yeah, exactly. But it just really comes either out of fear or of not really knowing what your brand is and what you stand for, because it does change over time. I think with any business, you go into it thinking in the beginning, this is what it is, and then eventually like the what actually changes over time, which is a perfect stepping stone for you to now throw in Simon Sinek and talk about why.
It's really hard to go out with a podcast and that.
I know.
So Simon Sinek, link in the show notes, and about start with the why and all that. But there's the book. Everyone's watched the talk, but the book is really, 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 really good. And there's a big point in it, which I'm sure he says in the talk, is the goal of business is, like making a profit and staying alive is a given, and the goal of your business should be to find people that believe with what you believe, and then you don't have to have all the self-talk and the bollocks. And we both know lots of co-working spaces that are full of really cool people, and you go to their website and they look like a beige carbon copy of something in somewhere else. They look a CRM CRM for Silicon Valley people kind of website. So is the I don't know, the block for people, is it that they're scared of having their voice and everything on this, or is it a workflow thing?
I think the first block is not knowing your voice, and that's this is what we found actually the first time, the first co-working space I was working with, we were writing a press release to announce a new space, and it took so long to write and press releases aren't hard to write. Like, you have one person write them and then they take a bit of editing and polishing and whatever. But we were just struggling to get the words right. And it wasn't because we're not good writers. Like, there are many good writers in that team, actually. But we realized the real issue was that we didn't know what we were trying to say exactly, because the message had changed a bit from the story we'd been telling for a long time with only having one space. As soon as you start having two, it's a completely different thing. And instead of just writing a press release, I ended up hosting, brand strategy meetings to basically figure out who we wanted to be and how we wanted to talk about what we're doing, just to get, an opening sentence in a press release right. So...
And had they done that stuff before? Had they never done that stuff, or had they done it so long ago they kind of not regrouped?
We'd loosely done it, but not to that depth. Not with that level of focus, and it had actually changed. The why was still there, but how we connected that with what we were doing, there was a missing link in the middle, that we just really needed to talk about and make sure that everyone felt the same way about it. Because if you have this document that's going between people and everyone's making a different revision on the same thing, you start to realize that actually we're thinking about this in different ways. Like, okay, that's what often comes out if you present someone with a piece of copy and they're just like, that's just not resonating with me, I want it to be more like this, and you realize there's just a fundamental that you don't understand the problem in the same way. That requires a big conversation. So despite the fact that, anyone could write a 500 word article or something like that in an hour, to actually get the messaging right is really difficult in some situations, because you come across these things where it's like, well, how do we actually feel about this issue? How does our brand want to look when we're talking about this issue?
And when you said like big conversation, so I've been in those big conversations, and some of them go around like, but they're really, really important. And how long do you think it takes to have that conversation, like in a physical space? Like, it might be something that happens might be an ongoing conversation, but to sit down and...
We had it as an ongoing thing, but for me it was like I needed it was probably three weeks with a 1 hour conversation each week, in a group environment. And in each of those weeks I'd kind of created an exercise, like some kind of framework to give to, because everyone else was quite operations minded. So I needed to be able to say to them, the first time I didn't do this and people were like, this feels pointless. So the second time I gave like a framework of, by the end of this, we need to have this model. It was like a quadrant model of these are the 4 things we talk about every time we talk about our brand type thing. They needed to see that. But actually the part for me that was really interesting to inform the way we write is the tangents. So everything that came off from there. And people would often apologize because they'd, start talking about something to do with that model, and then they end up 5 minutes away speaking on a tangent. And that was where I learned everything. That was where I learned any of the underlying differences that we had, where we didn't actually feel the same way about one of our values or something like that. And those were the things that we needed to work out before we could all consistently write in a similar way.
Can you say a little bit about values there? Because that's another one. We have this in WeShare as well. Everyone goes values, and everyone thinks they're really important. But as soon as someone goes, should we talk about values? Everyone runs, because it's How do you deal with that? Say like like this place, or one of those like indie co-working spaces where you haven't got 6 boards of directors and a 10 grand a day budget. How could you organise that?
How would you organise the values, like deciding the values?
That's what I meant to ask.
Yeah.
I was watching Philip come down the stairs. Sorry.
It comes from the founders and the team building the space, I think, and then the core community. Because the values are always there. Like, everyone has personal values. It's just whether or not you define them. But defining them helps as you grow and as you're building the community, because often what you're looking for, the thing that creates trust within a community, is having some shared values. So working out what those really important values are can help to find the right people. It can help you to speak really freely, because you kind of say, well, these are the things that are really important to us. So it doesn't matter if, us speaking in this way alienates some people. It will bring in the people who really share our values, and that's what we're trying to nurture within this space. How you work them out is, I guess, through conversation. For me, you'd have someone in the team who's often thinking about values and has that sense of idealism in them. Anyone who started a business is going to have that somewhere within them. So it's getting the right people around you to bring them out. I'm a person who often thinks about values anyway, so it was quite a natural thing for me to start thinking about them. And I was able to put out like a starter for 10. Okay, these are some of the things. But even getting like a giant list of values from the internet, which sounds awful, but get a giant list from the internet, hand them out to everyone and say, highlight the ones that you think apply here. And then you notice where the commonalities are and talk about them.
I've never thought of that till you just said it. That's such an obvious thing to do to kick it off, isn't it?
Yeah. Because people are scared to say them. And the difficulty is, once you say them out loud, everyone's quite impressionable in a group situation. So having these brainstorming sessions where everyone kind of writes down their thoughts, like I would often start them with Post-it notes and just have people write down their answers to a question on Post-its and put them on a wall. And then we start openly talking about it. Because if you start the conversation, then people's thoughts get limited by what's being said by others. And it may be like that they're having a thought that's in a completely different field from everyone else. And they hear the other people saying this one and they're like, oh, well, mine's wrong. I'm not going to bring it up. Where you just want it to be as open as possible. So getting down initial thoughts of like, okay, write down what you think our values are. And someone might be writing, like someone might write down revenue. And you're like, no, we mean our core fundamental values. But you're like, if someone in your team is thinking that revenue is one of your core values, then that needs to be talked about. So
I always write that. I'm always scared to do that. It's really important to do without anyone seeing. But I'm always scared to do it in case I put up something like, revenue or babies in blenders and.
I'm concerned that was your second thought, and this is probably why you're scared of it. But I understand. I think I was more comfortable running those sessions than being in them, because I told people in advance what the things we'd be thinking about were. So if they wanted to have prep time to feel more comfortable with it, they could. They wanted to come to me beforehand, they could. And I think that space is kind of important because it makes people more comfortable in it.
So I was trying to think how to leap from there to writing stuff to put on your website. I want people to go away with I must start a blog.
Yeah, for sure. So values are important, because the more cognizant you are of those values, the easier it is for you to speak with a natural voice. If you know, how you're talking, what's important to you, then you can go out and you can write something and be like, I'm absolutely confident that this matches with what we think is important. There are two sides of words that you put out into the internet, like in your own platform, so your website. One of them being your actual copy, so the branding and messaging and stuff that's on your website. I think the link there with values is a lot more clear. It's just like you work it out why you do what you're doing, what it is that you do. And it's difficult to do, but try and speak about them in a way that your ideal audience would speak about them, because you want them to be able to connect with it. I can talk about that a lot more, but I think you want to come round to content. You can
do the content thing and then go back to that, because that's
cool.
I can hear like 7 podcasts coming out here, but
so content for the blog is obviously important for SEO and for having something to talk about on social media, and we've created a society where we need to do those things just so that people can find out about us. the part we have control over is how interesting that content is. Because
you don't need to tread carefully. Just like...
because there's so much crap on the internet and we don't need more of it. So try and write about something that you're in. I was speaking to a VC the other day, and the line he used was that he's looking for people who are in a unique position to solve that problem, for investing in a startup. And in the same way, talk about things that you're in a unique position to talk about.
Yeah.
And let's be realistic. It's not going to be unique in the true sense of the word. You're not literally the only person, unless all you're talking about is the thoughts inside your head. In some cases, that might be very interesting. A lot of what I write for myself is about my own thoughts, but not always what people want to read. So try and think about, from within your community, inside your space, the things that other people, that not every other space is talking about, that not every other person on the internet is talking about. And that doesn't have to be that complicated. Like, you don't have to be talking about rocket science. I'm sure a lot of people talk about that on the internet anyway. Yeah. It can just be down to the way that you notice dynamics working within your community. So, like, for example, how the community interacts. This is a cliche example, but anyway, how the community interacts around food. Yep. How you've developed the way that you use food. That is a cliche,
but that's a really important thing.
And actually, I haven't seen that many people writing about it. I mean, the reason I think it's common is because I've tried to write it about 5 times. And then I get distracted by the food and the conversations.
One of the things in work hubs that kind of unifies this place every week is the writers thing. And writers thing. And when we started talking about going to Ravi's, the vegan vegetarian restaurant around the corner, it's so I can write and Ravi's. There's something.
Write and Ravi's.
And I don't know whether it's Ravi's or whether we just go for food is what I'm trying to spill out there. But we've united around that particular thing. I'd like it to be something more sophisticated.
Well, I think there's something in that about rituals, which is something else that would be really interesting to write about. Like, the rituals that you notice happening in a co-working space, like, because a lot of people in co-working spaces are freelancers, there's an element of wanting to create some kind of ritual in your life because it's a cornerstone. So even if it's when I get in the morning, I make myself porridge, or I make myself coffee, and it's a 5-minute process and whatever, or like I put my bag down, I go across the street to Pret. Even if it is something like that, there are these little rituals that we create for ourselves. And when you're in a co-working space, if you have the time and the headspace to do it, you can become aware of a lot of these little things happening within the space and investigate them and see where they come from. It's often like a psychological point or something like that, and it gives you something interesting to write about.
Sorry to stumble on that question.
That's okay.
I'm just going to say it. I was trying to frame it all elegantly. Who's the blog for? Is it for people in the community, or is it for people you'd like to attract to the community?
Totally up to you to decide, but I define it really as your broader community. So some co-working spaces make this official with community membership, but even the spaces that don't, there's often a community of people who are coming in for events who will happily recommend your space to their friends, and who are kind of loyal supporters. And that's kind of like who you write to, because when you write, your writing's always better if you're writing to a person. Like, you imagine a person, one single person, not like a profile, just imagine a person, so like, and write it for them.
Write it for Rebecca or write it for Bernie.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't write it for your...
Yeah, not like some not a demographic. Yeah. Like, you write it for, imagine a person, because then you'll actually connect with someone, and it, like, you get to stumbling points in your writing, and thinking about that one person helps you to figure out how you talk to them, because it's a very human business. So write like humans, write as though you're talking to people, but not in a colloquial way. I've taken a tangent there from what we were...
No, that's good. I was going to, as you were saying that, I was going to... My mouth is so seized up. Because you keep saying about alienating people, and I think it's... I just not even think. I think it's really important to write for that person, because then that's the person you're going to connect with.
Yeah.
And when we say alienating, and I don't mean it in this way, but that if you alienate 10,000 people and connect with 1,000 people, you probably only need like around 100 people max to connect with. So you have a better chance of being more accurate in what you're doing. And if you write about swastikas and genocide, you will.
Just all of those common interest things that everyone likes talking about.
You will alienate a lot of good people, but you'll annoy them by doing that. You're not going to alienate them in a kind of really nasty, libelous way, are you?
No. Well, I mean, if it was that subject, you might. But like a subject within co-working, I mean, if you were to decide, okay, I want to make a co-working space that's specifically for people in VR, and then when you're doing that, you're kind of like, but I'm scared to write something that like no one else is going to read. If I write content that's all about VR and the 10 subjects that are loosely around VR and co-working, then I'm not going to reach a bunch of people. People will stop being interested in my blog. So say you started it where it's just about co-working, and then you've got this fairly broad audience, and then you want to niche into just being about VR.
Yeah.
You start doing that, and all of a sudden the other readers start dropping off. You're like, well, actually that doesn't really matter, because the people you really want to connect with are the ones who are in VR. And they're if you're going to reject anyone like as members of your space who isn't in that field anyway, what's the point in targeting your writing to someone else? So the more you target in, the more likely you are to gain an actual reputation and to increase your knowledge as well, because through writing you improve your knowledge. So you improve your standing in that particular field, and it's much easier to go deep on a field than to go really broad and not really talk about anything.
Yeah, that's a really important thing. How can we just finish on how to pull ideas out of your community or your values and stuff like that, and the actual act of getting it from your brain onto a screen and then onto the internet?
Yeah. So I have a constant, me it's an Evernote note, that I just drop subjects into all the time wherever I come across anything in the industry. When I notice conversations happening around me in a space, because I just unintentionally eavesdrop all the time. There's a particular thread of conversation or a line or something that pops up, I'll just drop it into there, without necessarily thinking about how I'd structure it into an article, but just as this is something that I hear coming up quite often, this is an interesting point to explore. Have a huge list of those and be sort of non-judgmental with what you're putting in there. If you have a team, encourage them to do the same thing.
Do you have to use Evernote, or can you use
I think it probably works on other platforms.
Yeah. Just wanted to clarify that, guys.
Yeah, exactly. I am not paid by Evernote. So yeah, having some kind of brainstorming bucket where you just drop everything, because there are often very different mindsets for coming up with creative ideas, for being able to write different kinds of articles as well. So perhaps even group those things at some point into more creative writing, something that's more technical writing or more professional writing, and split them out however your brain happens to work. For me, it is pretty much in those categories. And then when you're actually producing content, I do it based on whatever creative mindset I happen to be in at that time.
How long? Because how long does it take to write something? Because I sometimes sit down. If someone goes, "Oh, you need to write this," in my head it's like, "Oh, you need to do that." We do a weekly blog, so my blog must take a week to write. But how long do you think people should set aside for this? Which is obviously dependent on ability, but
it takes me about a day to write a good, well-researched blog article. That's to actually do the writing of it. And before that, normally it's been something that I've been sort of passively researching just through living for quite a while. So it's something that's been in my mind that I've been exploring. The actual writing process of it is about a day. And that's if it's something like interviewing someone, or just doing something that's more thought leadership style.
Yeah.
And probably like 600 words in that realm.
Beautifully crafted words.
Yes, 600 beautifully crafted words. It's actually hard to write. I can get to 1,200 words quite easily, but getting it to something that's a readable length is a lot harder. So I generally do everything based on it being a day, depending on the type of content. If it's a longer, more research, like something that's closer to doing an essay or a thesis or something like that. Not a full-length thesis, obviously, but then
Yes.
it would take longer. But it's often something that people have sitting on their plate for a week because it goes through different approval processes. There's typically someone who has to read it before it goes out. People want changes. If you're in complete control of it by yourself, then it can be a much quicker process.
You can hit publish
Yeah.
and then find out the mistakes.
Yeah. I find it easier to have like a submission date like a week before when publication is intended, because especially if you're freelancing for someone or you're working with a freelancer, you get it in, you review it and everything like that, and then you have to do all of the setting up. The setting up on a blog takes a lot longer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've found a brilliant way of doing it.
Yeah, it's called
But-
fancy hands.
Yeah.
I can never.
That's great.
I can never. I know. I've made myself get quicker at it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if I have a lot of jobs on, I'll just say, can you put these blogs onto this blog, and then I'll get something like Copy Blogger and say make them look like this, and quite often I get the same person there. So
Yeah.
So
But it says a lot, really, that it's something that's worth you outsourcing.
Yeah.
Like it does take a lot of time just to get
I'm
out.
top of my game there, Rebecca.
Yeah.
And my just before, how about this is something I struggle with a lot. So I'm I want to pretend I'm asking for a friend, but what about editorial calendars? Because when I lock into one, it works, but getting to working it out is a
Yeah,
mind melt.
I find them really difficult. Personally,
I'm so glad you said that.
tend to, yeah. I really like them and I like how they look. I feel awesome when I set up an editorial calendar and I color code everything and I'm like, oh, I can see that there's this type of content and everything's perfectly balanced. And I'm like, great. And then it comes to, 1 week in and you realize that everything's been reshuffled and missed and whatever. It's really hard to stick to because things come up, like if you're planning a month in advance, you don't know what's going to come up in that month that may be more important for you to talk about. There may be an opportunity that arises that takes time away from those other things. So you might get a guest blogging opportunity on, like, I don't know.
BernieJMitchell.com.
Yeah, exactly, which is what everyone is striving for. And it's like when those things come up, you reallocate your time. Like the reality is some of those deadlines will get missed because there are other priorities and you're only like one person or a team of one persons. Like there's finite time. So I tend to take, personally, it works best for me if I have a month editorial calendar where I'm kind of like, these are the things that I want to have done in this month. But when they actually fall within that month, will probably move a few days from where I hoped that it would. And it really just depends on how many other responsibilities you have during that time. Like, if it's not your full-time job to be writing, then that's going to happen because other things will detract.
Like coffee machines and block toilets.
Exactly. Yeah. There's the reality of being in a co-working space is that your first job is always member facing. And yeah, if that takes up all of your time in one day, the writing gets postponed. But it's important to come back to it. It is important to keep doing it. It's just like, don't hate yourself for doing the most important thing, which is actually being a co-working space and engaging the community.
That's where can we find your writing?
On introspective.com with a B instead of a P. I'm going to get really sick of saying that.
You are.
Yeah.
You should just say
Sorry.
like Bex and have it redirect.
Yeah.
And where's the best place to find you online? So it's introspective.com.
Find me on Instagram, but I mean the website is a great channel because you can contact me through there and everything. But if you want to check out what I'm doing elsewhere on the internet, there are lots of yoga pictures on Instagram, and photos of co-working spaces when I run around visiting them. Food, lots of food.
I particularly like your little travel guide with all the co-party, co-working event, Bali bits on your...
On Instagram.
No, the pictures with the white and the...
Oh, right, yes.
The white...
I'm
really digging it out now.
The work section on my website. It has some pictures with words on it, and Bernie's very impressed.
I'm beautifully presented.
If anyone else would like, pictures and words on the pictures, I'm happy to talk you through how to make that happen.
There's an app for that. So thank you very much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Go and check out Rebecca's work, and we'll see you here or we'll see you somewhere else. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye.
The best way you can support the show is to leave a review in iTunes and leave your Twitter handle so Bernie can say thanks.